Hello, welcome to the Trumansburg VCF assembly guide. We'll be walking you through how to put it together. You're going to need a set of needle nose pliers, a small Phillips head screwdriver, a very small flathead screwdriver. I got this one from I think a computer hard drive kit. You'll need a 11/32 socket for the switch. You'll need a 1/2 and a 7/16 sockets for the potentiometer nuts and the jack nuts. So the first thing we're going to do is go through and remove all 6 knobs. We won't be reusing any of these. You can just set them aside, save them for another project. Okay, now we're going to use a socket and remove the 2 signal attenuators for the audio inputs. Next, we're going to remove the unipolar attenuated CV input. We're not going to reuse that. I like to remove all the pieces that we're not going to be reusing first and get them out of the way. Now we're going to use that Phillips head screwdriver and remove the PCB mount screws. The ones on the rear should be pretty short. Be sure not to lose them. They're tiny, tiny little things. If you do happen to lose one, they are a 4x40 thread screw. So you should be able to go to any hardware store and get them. The ones on the front are black. Those are harder to find at a local hardware store, but not impossible. So we're going to just pull out those pieces that we've already loosened. We will remove them from the PCB so they are not in our way. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to reach into our bag of parts and we will pull out the 2 small black jumpers. These are tiny little things, and we're going to use these to bridge the pins on the header where we removed the signal attenuators for the audio inputs. Each of those 2 headers has 3 pins. You want to use it on the left and center pin. It's kind of hard to see. That right pin is exposed. So if you're reading it left to right, left and center are bridged, the right is exposed. And we're going to do that for both of the audio inputs. If you don't do this, you will get no audio through your signal inputs, because essentially the potentiometer thinks it's all the way down. So by bridging them, it's going to think it's all the way up. Remove the rest of these. All of the potentiometers are the same, except for the resonance, which is a dual potentiometer. Now we're going to remove the switch. The 3rd and 4th 3-pin headers down from the top are the switch. We're replacing that with the switch that's in your parts bag. It's the exact same switch, just with longer leads. Now we're going to remove the front black screws holding the PCB standoffs on, because we're going to be reusing those screws. These stair-stepped PCB standoffs we'll set aside because we don't need those. We're going to be using the 4 that are in the bag that are just traditional .com style PCB standoffs. So we'll go ahead and get ready to mount those PCB standoffs. Those are the knobs. Here's our new switch. We're going to take these black screws and finger tight install the standoffs. I like to give them a little bit of flexibility. It just makes assembly and attaching the PCB a little bit easier. Gives it a little bit of wiggle room, literally. Get all 4 of those on. Now we can start feeding our parts through the holes. Make sure that double pot goes through the resonance hole. That's the first one I do because it's obvious what it is. And I just get these, you know, finger tight so they're held in place, but I can still rotate them if I need to for alignment and things like that. Now I will pull up on my phone the PCB layout on the data sheet that's on the Synthesizer.com website. If you still have your printout from when you purchased your Q150 ladder filter, it will be on there also. I don't expect you to be able to read it off of my phone. I'm just showing you what it looks like. Pretty hard to see, but it shows you where everything goes, and you can use that as a go-by to make sure you're putting the right things in the right holes. Connect the 2 ends of the switch. It does not, at this point, does not matter which header goes onto which of those 2 switch receiving headers on the PCB. We do not mount the switch through the hole yet. That will be the last thing that we do. Continue to put these together. I get everything finger tight, make sure everything needs to rotate, and I feed the wires around and mount the PCB back on the standoffs. If you have an older module that has the open frame jacks like this module does, you'll need to make sure that the legs on the jacks are not touching anything metal. They're not touching each other. Make sure they're not touching the edges of the panel or the standoffs, because if they do, they will ground out and the jack will not work. The same could be said about a potentiometer. The legs of the potentiometer are touching anything else, it could ground out and just not function. So if you get this fully assembled and you're having audio signal problems, that's one thing to look for. Pop the module out, make sure none of those things are touching each other or anything else. Make sure those potentiometers are centered, obviously, and get them nice and tight. You don't have to torque them down too much, just enough that they don't slide around. And then we have our switches still loose. Just checking everything, make sure it's snug. Feed it through, make sure that it's got plenty of travel on the wiring. We're going to put our knobs on, and then we're going to go ahead and test the module. You will know the orientation of the switch is correct because the 24 dB will self-oscillate. The 12 dB won't. So crank the resonance up, put the frequency cutoff about halfway, and if it doesn't self-resonate, your switch is in the 12 dB position. Flip it and it should start resonating. So get it oriented properly. These are all the parts that we don't need anymore. I put them in a baggie along with your original Q150 panel in case you ever need to revert back. And let me know if you guys have any problems.